If I could summarize Weekend Nachos into one word or a phrase, I think most people would say Weekend Nachos is stupid. When Weekend Nachos started, people thought Weekend Nachos was very stupid. But then basically all those people got old and stopped going to shows anyway. So then new people come in who don't think it's stupid. And that's what's amazing about when you're a band for 10 years, is that like anybody who doesn't like you either stops coming to shows anyway or will probably be convinced that you're legit because you're just fucking putting the work in.
Kind of just wanted to play really fast. We kind of wanted to be like Kung Fu Rick.
Well, John and I had been sort of talking about doing a band like this for a while. It was my first apartment in DeKalb at Northern Illinois University, and we lived together, and since probably at some point from the start of us living together, we were talking about doing a band like this, but we were just wanting to do a band that had really fast parts and really slow parts. So,
like, when we first started talking about it, me and John, it was like supposed to be a two-piece that sounds like Godstomper, and I was going to play drums and he was going to play bass and sing.
I think ever since we started the band, I had these like subconscious aspirations for us to actually record records and like play shows and do some real shit, you know? It just didn't seem possible. But I think in the back of my head, I always had plans for us to do something, you know?
They seemed to all be kind of like friends, like John and Aaron, and like, it was like a group of people that I didn't know, and I kind of like started to meet them and become friends with them just from like coming to shows here.
We really had aspirations of destroying this coffee house in DeKalb called the House Cafe. A guy that I was friends with named John Ugolini.
he was asking us if we had any kind of like obnoxious loud band that could play so we could basically bum everyone out.
Actually asked us to open this show that he was doing for Call Me Lightning, this band.
That was the only thing we were supposed to do, was play one show. So, but that was 13 years ago.
First show was a rather interesting one.
I feel like the actual like rowdiness of the show has been kind of like played up over the years, but John broke a table and like a vase that had like some probably fake flowers in it. I don't know, I think we were just like obnoxious, like we just like said like shitty dumb jokes at people and like made fun of the other bands and were generally not cool.
This was 2004, so there wasn't even really any power violence bands, like even in Chicago. It was kind of like the new wave that was coming through. There was other bands like in the country, but so like nobody in DeKalb had seen any of this besides like us or knew like, and most of the people at the show, a few of our friends were there, but it was just mostly just people there like drinking coffee and doing their homework and stuff. I think we had practice twice. We had a demo that was like the demo release, so we weren't very good. Just be loud and stupid and like make people laugh, which is what happened.
It was the first Weekend Nachos t-shirt, but they still make it. It's John and me, and I'm playing some gaudy looking bass with a Dying Fetus shirt, long hair, and it says "Defeat the Christian Right" across the back. Broke a bunch of stuff, and the owners held my guitar hostage. They took the guitar hostage and wouldn't give it back to us until we agreed to pay for the damages, and by that means we just didn't get paid for the show.
I don't remember them holding our equipment hostage. Maybe they did, but we were definitely going to get paid, and then we're not. And we had to they made us leave immediately. They were just like, you guys need to get out of here right now.
And then we were banned from the venue for life, but then they changed ownership 6 months later, and we played again and got banned again.
We played there a second time, and literally the same thing happened. They got all pissed off and said that we could never play there again.
A short-lived venue in DeKalb called the Rodeo, and they would do theme nights, so the audience would dress up or whatever, and we played, and Andy and I dressed up as a Catholic schoolgirl, and he was a Catholic schoolboy, and that is why I'm on the back of the Torture 7-inch in a skirt.
We were playing, I think, multiple bands, or at least one band on the show was Christian. Of course, at the time, that was a big problem for us. We thought that was stupid, so we were gonna be obnoxious. And Ron's girlfriend at the time had previously gone to girls' Catholic school, so she still had her skirt from then and all that stuff, her uniform. So he was like, oh, I can put that on. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go to the Goodwill and get some little blue dress shorts, and I can look like a little weird Catholic schoolboy.
Our friend Danielle dressed up in a full nun's habit, and she's up in the front. So that was a pretty ridiculous show overall.
I was wearing sweatpants and a Weekend Nacho shirt. I remember I slipped and hit my head on the monitor, and I thought I had a concussion, but I just played the rest of the set anyways because I didn't care.
So again, it was oh, seize a nice opportunity to be dicks. A lot of the early shows were just let's be stupid and obnoxious. And then I guess it became less about that.
We recorded that first demo just out of practice of ours. We put one mic, hung it from the ceiling, and recorded it all like that.
I don't even think it was a 4-track. I think it might have been a 2-track. It was a really, really primitive tape recording thing. We just did it in Adam's, the drummer at the time. We did it in his bedroom. We just did all the music with one microphone in the room, and then John went back and did vocals over it.
We had all these songs that we liked. We figured, why don't we record it better with Andy and just put out an actual 7-inch, see what happens, because people were starting to like the demo for some reason.
But then the 7-inch, we did more proper than that, and I did that in my parents' basement. Had multiple mics on the drums, and I did a guitar overdub. Yeah, I don't know what led to us. I don't know, I think John was just I want to put out a 7-inch for us, and we were okay, so then we did it. Yeah, there was we played a basement in DeKalb where I don't even remember who else played, but I don't know if I had a bunch of porn magazines for some reason. I don't know if I found them or if I just had them for some reason, but we just ripped them up while we played and threw them all over the room. And that was just really funny because that was one of the first shows that I remember thinking that we actually sounded good. I take that back. The first really good sounding show we had was when we played at the house I lived at in DeKalb, where we had there was a house party / show, and we played, and it was packed, and it was a lot of fun. And our friend Diego got pushed through a window in our front room, his elbow went through the window, and so there was a bunch of shit got broken in my home, but it was awesome.
It was John and Andy and Ron, and Andy was putting more time into his other band and less time in the Weekend Nachos, and so I was coming in on guitar, but Ron was kind of equally flaky.
I don't remember, it was a fest type show. It was one of those all day events in a gymnasium, but that one we did with just bass, drums, and vocals, and that was probably a shit show.
This is not the first one, but I'm going to pretend like it is for this documentary. is when I saw them at Chicago Fest 2005. And then the guy from not Direct Control, fuck, what was that fucking band? World Burns to Death, slapped John over a merch table.
We got to the show pretty early, like about an hour earlier than anyone else. So I had our Defeat the Christian Right shirt and our demo tape, and I just set it up on the very end of like a million tables, like literally this much space. Jack from World Burns to Death showed up with his girlfriend and demanded that we take it off the table because they needed all of that space for their 500 black t-shirt distro or whatever. And at the very end of our set, I said something like, "Yo, this goes out to those fucking crust punks that tried to steal our merch spot. Fuck you!" Or something dumb like that. And then 20 minutes later, his girlfriend came up to me at our table, at our little merch spot, and was like, fuck you! You can't be calling us crust punks. Like, that's what they were upset about. And then Jack came 5 minutes later and asked me if I had called his girlfriend a bitch, and I said, no, I didn't. And then he slapped me and said, suck my fucking dick!
Overselling his fucking guyliner merch or whatever. And then when they were playing, I jumped on the stage, and this was when Chicago Fest was really big, so there was probably 500 people watching World Burns to Death. I said, Weekend Nachos rules, and then I staged over into the crowd.
Kyle jumped off the stage during the World Burns to Death set, and right before he did, he grabbed the backup mic and was like, Weekend Nachos rules! It's pretty great.
And his only comeback was I crush your nachos.
The first show I played, Ron wasn't there. I had just learned all the songs, and it was just, and Adam played drums. So it was just John and Adam and I, just guitar, drums, and vocals.
First time I saw them live was probably at this place called Pool Party House it was in Bloomington though, and it was fall of 2005. Ron didn't go to that show. I don't even know if he was in the band at the time. He probably was, but it was just A-Ross, Inverted, and John. My friend Nick got their demo. Had seen them, I think, at Albion House the summer before, which is their first summer of existence, and it's oh, they're terrible live.
Yeah, there were a few shows like that where I just, I was like, what the fuck is going on right now?
We did 4 or 5 shows in California, up and down the coast, with In Disgust.
I guess what jumps out to me is the first time we went to California, we flew out, and it was Ron and John and Adam and I, and we flew out without most of our gear, and we met up with this band In Disgust, and they picked us up, and we barely knew them, and they just showed us the greatest fucking time. We met them in Chicago maybe 6 months before that at this Latino hardcore fest. I don't even really remember why they helped us.
I remember the first show that we did was in San Jose, and it was awesome. It was so cool. There was tons of people there. Godstomper played. The drummer of Godstomper sang A Whole New World to everybody in the crowd. It was honestly, we got a great response. People were circle pitting. It was crazy. We'd never played outside of Illinois before.
There were just a lot of really surreal, ridiculous things that happened on that California tour.
Just a ton of fucking rowdiness.
Because there was a at least 12-inch black dildo in the van that we were touring in, and it kept getting thrown around to people during the shows. But I remember I played one of our songs using that as the, instead of a pick, I guess.
We're always naked. We're always jumping off of something into something,
Yeah, we used to go cliff diving a lot. Always naked. Skinny dipping, did a lot of that. And Aaron was naked showering in this stand-up shower with a clear glass door, and he pressed his ass up against. We were just always naked on those first 2 tours.
Because that was the first legit tour I ever did. I had done weekends and stuff with other bands, but that was the first time I flew someplace and got to do cool things.
I went to Chicago when I was 17 years old for a random trip, and I was taken to a show by a couple of friends. John played drums in a band called Few and the Proud, and I actually met him at that show, and when I met him, we became very good friends immediately.
Everybody, John was, when he was in Weekend Nachos, which to people that loved American Nightmare and had swoopy haircuts, was super terrible. Like, they thought it was garbage, they hated it. But John was also in Few and the Proud, which is a straight edge band, and everybody thought it was cool. And I tried to get Weekend Nachos to play the show in my basement, and people were like, no, don't book them, they're terrible. Because, like, you know, whatever John like is like, you know, they're a band for people that wear sweatpants. Even though every member of Few and the Proud probably has worn sweatpants at some time. I'm only going to talk about sweatpants in this interview, I feel it's good. What was I saying? I don't know. Weekend Nachos is for boners and dorks. And that's what hardcore is about. And if you've got a swoopy haircut and you're into an American Nightmare in 2005, you suck. And if, what year is it, 2016? Jesus Christ. And what's cool now? Like, wearing Kangol hats or some shit.
We were practicing, and we had a show the next day. And I said, okay, so we gotta be there by 7. And Aaron was like, sure. And Adam was like, sure. And Ron was like, okay, I'll do my best. And I was like, no, we're not headlining the show. Like, we really do have to be there by 7. And Ron looked at me and he was like, I said I'll do my best. And I remember Aaron and I looked at each other like, what the fuck doesn't he understand? Well, like, we have to be there by 7.
Him and I ended up getting in fights over, like, just how to play things.
The only fond memories, I guess, are just John and Ron getting into fights. That's about it.
Yeah. I remember one of them was, we were tracking Torture. I don't remember what song, and I played a track or whatever, and he came in, and without listening to it, he was just looking at the waveform. He's like, well, your waveform doesn't quite match right here, so, like, I want you to redo it. I'm like, fuck?
There's no fucking way I said that. Waveforms? I don't, you can't tell a riff by a waveform. He's full of shit.
And we were just arguing over, like, how I wasn't playing it right, and he was like, you want me to play it? I'll play it. I'm like, I just learned this. Like, come on, man. At that point, it was Aaron, John, and myself. John had moved out of DeKalb. I was still living out there at the time, and Aaron was living in Naperville or something like that. But I don't remember the exact details, but I know we were practicing in Aaron's basement in Naperville, which was a bit further than down the street in DeKalb or whatever. They had wanted to practice, and I told them, like, hey guys, like, I have this project to do. I don't know what time I'll be done. If I can make it, I'll come. I don't want to sound petty or mean or anything, but, like, he called me a bunch of times just wanting an update. I'm like, dude, I'm working on this. Like, so we got in a huge argument, and then I didn't talk to him for a month, and he didn't talk to me for a month, and then I saw him at a show at the House Cafe. After that, and, you know, we both were like, hey, I'm sorry, like, that was shitty, whatever.
All of us, not just me, had noticed that Ron wasn't really feeling it, and, like, wasn't really putting any efforts to, like, be available for shows or anything. So one day I was just like, Ron, do you even really want to be in this band? And Ron was like, no. And I was like, okay then.
I definitely had a lot of fun in my, I guess, brief time in the band. I probably did less than 20 shows altogether.
This is a zine called Mindless Mutant that a guy named Matt Rowland made. He actually went on tour with Weekend Nachos for 32 days all over the country. If you have this, I highly suggest that you reread this or read it. There's a lot of really cool stuff about how their tour went. It's absolutely hilarious. They actually came to my hometown to play one show on this tour. My favorite one is John and Christian taking a bath together. He's got the horse. Weird dudes.
So there was this show in California that we were playing, one time where it was also with In Disgust and it was with Black Breath, and someone jumped off of a trampoline that was outside of the house, through the window into the house.
This is absolutely true. Guy literally jumped off of a trampoline through an open window into the living room from outside on his way to landing, punched Chris in the face, knocked him out, and he just went limp, and I caught him.
And then John, everyone was like moshing, and the show was like really crazy, and John like grabbed him from behind him and pulled him out of the room. The best touring that I ever did, I think, was with Weekend Nachos. When we started going out, it felt a lot like that was the first time that we were really on our own and kind of doing it for ourselves.
What the fuck?
Never felt more American. So fucking stupid. She put me throwing my water bottle at the sheriff down there. Eat that.
What are you getting? Tiger's blood. What? Soft serve. Oh.
If you see anyone beating up on someone that's smaller than them, everybody get together and fucking kill them. There's no place for that. There is place for the Jack Skellingtons. Sounds about fresh and core.
It was after Punish and Destroy came out, and we were playing in Miami at this, I think it was called the Firefly House. And it was just this concrete structure that was like, it used to be a building, but it wasn't anymore, and that's where they had shows, and there was no roof on it. And it felt like 1,000,000 degrees, and we were all just playing in our underwear because we were like dripping in sweat and just completely disgusting. But it was also just like an amazing show.
Christian / Varg, and then John and Adam. No, Adam wasn't on ours. It was either Joey Capel or Dan Bordage. I can't remember. And no shit talking on Joey, because he is a good drummer, but I was like, yeah, I should be in this band. I can play better than that. Yeah, so I joined this band too because I was like, which is maybe selfish of me, but, you know, it's like, I want to be in a band, but I don't really know anybody. I do know these guys kind of, and I want to like play shows. It'd be cool to play shows that people like go nuts and give a shit about. I was like, oh, well, Nachos needs a drummer. You know, like they have this weird revolving door of drummers, so that could be me. Why not? Hey, Ross, you know, you guys have a solid drummer? I see you've been switching around. He's like, no. It's like, can you play drums? I was like, yeah. And I sent him the link, or gave him the link to my old band, Big Ten Football, I played drums in. I was like, here's what I can do. And then my first show with the band was November 1st, 2007. It was Pulling Teeth, Frightener, Harm's Way, maybe one more, at Reggie's. From the time I started playing drums when I was 9, like I always had really severe stage fright. So that was definitely, you know, that was like my first time playing a show where there were more than like 20 people at it. They had a bouncer on stage because Reggie's has this like chain link fence in front of the stage, and you know, kids weren't supposed to stage dive, but naturally they were. And this bouncer was up there trying to prevent kids from stage diving. And at one point, I can't remember what song it was, but I definitely remember at one point John like passed the mic to the bouncer on a chorus part, and he was just like,
well, I had met John. I had known John for a long time. I think I met when I was 15. Obviously, John was in a lot of other bands prior to Weekend Nachos. As far as like, I mean, Aaron too. I think I met Aaron probably around the same time. I had never met Ron or Adam when Weekend Nachos first started, but obviously I had known Andy too because we all grew up going to shows in like the DuPage area pretty much.
I met John through the Chicago Hardcore Board back in like 2003 or something. We started talking that way, and met him in person, I think, at a Stand and Fight show. Kind of became friends that way, kept in touch. I was playing in like a youth crew band called Double Cross at that time that John became very keen on, and kind of helped us get on some shows. So we just kind of remained friends for a while. We started doing bands together. Few in the Proud was one of them. We did Harm's Way through that band, where we just kind of switched up the instruments. James sang, John played bass, I played drums.
Yeah, because I guess Weekend Nachos started like a little before Harm's Way started, right?
Yeah.
Like just both, a little bit before.
Yeah, so Weekend Nachos and Harm's Way, both sort of side project bands to Few in the Proud. And I think the first Weekend Nachos show that I personally saw was the first Harm's Way show. There was a show at DePaul University that Weekend Nachos was playing that we just kind of jumped on and played and played a couple songs, borrowed all their gear, which they were not happy about at that time, and played that show. It was a very kind of rememberable show for us because not only was it our first show, but James had broke the mic in his hand. It kind of shattered into very many pieces.
Also, a memorable moment is when there wasn't too many people there, maybe 20 people, and I had taken off my shirt and I wore the mask for the first time, and Aaron took off his shirt when I did and started moshing. And I always remember that about that show because, like, obviously no one knew who we were. But then, like, you know, Weekend Nachos had just started, so there wasn't the following there had been, you know, obviously later on, not even close. And what's funny is when Weekend Nachos first started as well, I thought that was just a joke band, like Food Fight was. I didn't know if they were to be taken seriously or not, like when they first started. I don't even know if John knows that that's what I thought. But I just thought that I was like, oh, like, this is just another, like, goofy, like, you know, not serious band.
Yeah, I think a lot of us thought Weekend Nachos was a joke band at first, and we'd make comments to John, and be like, so funny. And he would get offended and be like, what are you talking about? It is a real band. It is a serious band.
Yeah.
You know, it was his baby, and obviously it would evolve into something much larger down the line. But I think a lot of people had that impression at first that it was this very not serious thing. And he would definitely take offense to that. I don't know if it was like if he was truly offended or if it was just kind of part of the joke. But in many ways, it was kind of like how Harm's Way started too. It was kind of, you know, kind of extreme and in so many ways, and kind of evolved into something.
Sure.
Very, very
I think
real.
part of it too is that obviously the choice of band name was like a turn off to a lot of people at first. Because I remember like when the demo came out and like the first record came out, like people on message boards were just like, what the fuck? Who the fuck is this?
The first out of town thing I did with the band was This Is For You Fest 2007. That was my first like out of town show, and that was a cool fest. That fest is notable for being the first appearance of James in the ski mask, like the kind of, I guess you could say, iconic photo of James in a ski mask.
We met at This Is For You Fest, and that was basically the first time people had seen Harm's Way, too, because I think Harm's Way had only played 2 other shows since then. The Weekend Nachos was pretty established at this time.
Right, yeah, they were one of the headliners at This Is For You Fest in Daytona.
Because This Is For You Fest was definitely more of like a
punk hardcore.
Yeah, like a punk, more punky hardcore. It had, I guess that's how like the Florida scene was at the time. Not anymore, but so they played. They obviously had a really good reaction. It was a really fun set, if I remember. And then, actually, specifically, I remember when they played Scared of Naked Men. This Is For You Fest had rafters, and like they were probably only as high as the ceiling, and like that breakdown, I remember I jumped from like a pretty far distance to hang on the rafters, and then like started climbing on the rafters and just like kicking, because everyone was singing along.
Yeah.
I remember just kicking everyone in front, and like that was a pretty. I remember that was pretty wild show actually.
Yeah.
So that leads us up to the first tour that I did with Nachos. That was the summer 2008 U.S. tour. There was a lot of long drives on that tour.
You can make a coastline at least for driving.
After that, we played in Salt Lake City, which was a great, like one of those, you need these experiences to like really appreciate good shows, where we, drive essentially almost all night, or like all day. It's like a 12-hour drive or something from Denver to Salt Lake City. And we show up, and it's at this house called the Loom House, which is some guys from, I guess, like Gaza at that point. And John had set stuff up. Notably too, John is just texting people, or like when we get the chance and access to a computer, like hitting MySpace, because we didn't, nobody, in the olden days, no smartphone, too cheap to buy a GPS. They did exist at the time, but they were expensive. So our main way of navigating was I had printed out MapQuest directions from every venue to every venue, but that only helps so much in that it's like, well, you're not always just going directly to the venue. So if you want to go stay at anyone's house, it's like they got to write out directions to you or text them to you or just go with you in the van. So that's like the kind of thing we're dealing with here. So not to be all old man yells at cloud about it, but it was the fucking Stone Ages. So we end up in Salt Lake City, pull up to this party, and clearly this was never intended to be a show. And they're like, oh, you can play, we'll like maybe get some money together or something. And they're like, oh, good. Set up. So we set up, we play, pop a breaker, maybe 6 songs in, and we're like, well, fuck this, we're done. This is stupid. The California leg of that tour was like arguably the best part. Reason being is it was Harm's Way's first time out of town, or out of Illinois. And it was definitely their first, or not out of Illinois, their first West Coast appearance.
Pretty much they did a follow-up West Coast tour that summer, and we flew out to California to meet them, and we played kind of a couple Southern California shows, a couple Northern California shows together. Just hopped in their van with them. Yeah. So it was super, super packed.
Space Jam. Where's the box? Space Jam, we need the box. Yeah. The door. Alright, he's satisfied.
10 of us, 11 of us in simply a cargo van, so it was a death trap. But it was so much fun. I mean, to this day, it was probably one of the most fun tours or kind of string of shows we've ever done.
On the streets, everything is legal. I don't believe in an eye for an eye. I believe in 2 eyes for an eye.
I mean, Weekend Nachos just played to slightly different crowds that like, but at the same time, like Harm's Way, when we sound different, like we fit in really well with that style of crowd, like Power Violence and faster music. So like, I don't know if a lot of people had heard of us, but at the same time, like Weekend Nachos brought tons of people, and then Harm's Way would play, and it would be pretty awesome. So
yeah, if they heard a fast beat or like blast beat, they liked it. So.
The other good part was Coke Bus happened to be on their West Coast tour, so it's like a very, legendary show in my mind, because it's us, Harm's Way, Coke Bus, In Disgust. Real gathering of the mind, so to speak, time and place thing, because Harm's Way's there, they're stoked because it's their first time in California. Coke Bus is there, they're having a great time, they're stoked. We're all just there's this giant dumpster out front of Burnt Ramen. I think it was Coke Bus, like they had a football, so they were just kind of like passing the football around, and that's when I found out like Matt Rowland was actually like a pretty good football player. Like apparently he'd been the high school quarterback or whatever. But they accidentally threw the football into this giant dumpster that just reeks, because it's just, it's like maybe 80, 90 degrees and just fucking reeks like death. And so once it went in there, we're like, well, who's going in the dumpster?
Is there a shower here? Not coming in the van.
I think I went in the dumpster just to see what's in there, and there really wasn't that much like garbage in there. There's like a mattress and maybe like an old like cabinet or something, but it's like, how does this death smell it's physically a part of this dumpster now.
USA! USA! I was standing over there like 2 minutes ago and like I didn't realize that. So I just want to hear like do it! Hey, Matt, how was it? Good. Are you videotaping it?
Yes.
But we did stop in Baytown, Texas at a Waffle House, and our server was a juggalette, and she was like a poet, and she was reading us her juggalo poetry. So that was cool. That was worth it. She was gonna get out of that town someday and like make it as a juggalo poet, which is real cool. Like the last show of that tour was in Cleveland at Now That's Class, and that was cool. And then it was like, let's get the fuck home, and we just drove overnight from Cleveland to make sure we couldn't play any more shows. After the Cleveland set, like I just took a knife and just cut all of my drum heads. It was like, this is done. This is done for now.
They had a special nacho-shaped record. That was limited to, I don't know how many, I think 40 or something like that.
We should have known that people would be selling that on eBay and stuff, but we never really thought about it, because we're idiots, but we just thought it'd be like a cool thing to do with those songs on the Relapse comp. Yeah, people bought them right at the beginning of the show and they were gone.
And then mine, I bought one at that record release show, and then Nick Barron put it back on top of the pile to sell the record. Then it was resold.
Kyle's Nacho record got stolen at the release show. Like it literally got stolen at the show by somebody. And I gave him my copy. And then for some reason I guess wasn't happy with the fact that he didn't thank me for it and took it back.
John set one aside for me, and then I said, whoa, awesome. And then he was pissed that I said, whoa, awesome, instead of thank you very much, and said that he wasn't going to give me the record.
Which is a fucking insane, psychotic thing to do.
And then we had to argue about it like it was fucking Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Nick Barrett eventually made him give me the record.
And then shortly after that, there was just kind of that first big fallout between A-Ross and Caution temporarily. Basically because we had to get a practice space, and I think John was just told Christian at the time, it was very straight up in blunt John fashion, like, hey, you need to like throw in this much money. And Christian just loved fucking with him and being like, no, I'm not going to do that. And John was like, what? No, you're out of the band. Like, fuck you. And then Eros was like, you can't just kick him out of the band, fuck this. And Neighbors also like had kind of talked about being kind of over it at that point, like over hardcore in general and whatever. So then he was like, I think I'm gonna quit. And I was like, well, I like this band and I don't want to quit. And he's like, that's fine, do what you will. So he just handed over control and all the money to me.
Aaron was still in the band, and he was asking if I wanted to join on second guitar, or like maybe like temporarily join, like, oh, like if you're available, like we can do shows with 2 guitars, and if not, like Aaron will just play guitar. And I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. But then Aaron ended up quitting, so he's like, do you just want to play guitar?
John and I had been friends for probably a decade at that point. And I had been playing in a band called Convicted that was essentially Harm's Way, but with a different singer. The events that unfolded that were the end of Aaron and Varg's role in, or Chris, whichever way you want to call it, role in Nachos transpired. So there was a hole, and John wasn't wanting to give up. So I was like, hey, you know, I have a bass. I have some bass gear. I've never played bass in a band, but I'd be into it. And we went for it.
Even after I left Harm's Way, like, both bands have always just kind of continued to grow side by side each other. We both started kind of around the same time. Harm's Way was originally much faster and kind of became slower and heavier. Weekend Nachos was, you know, kind of much faster and became sort of slower and heavier too. We've always kind of just like fed off of each other, and both bands got way more popular, you know, till the end.
They were one of the first bands doing, you know, 40-day long U.S. tours, you know, and going to Europe and pushing their music as hard as they could, and, you know, it kind of made us want to kind of up our game, right? John was with us for a while. He ended up leaving the band, but you know, he left his mark, and it made us want to push this band as hard as he was essentially pushing Weekend Nachos. So, you know, they continue to be, you know, influential on us.
More than any other band, and more than any other band that we had done before this or anything like that, like Nachos was very much like our sister band, and it was always kind of in the healthiest sense of the word, like, for lack of a better word, a competition. It really wasn't competitive, but it was kind of like someone's pushing the bar, they're doing something really cool, they're going to Europe, or they're doing a big release, or they're doing whatever. We can do that. We're from the same place, and you know, we have the same kind of ethics. Like, we can fucking do that. Like, there's no reason we can't. And it was that kind of spirit that I think, I don't know how much it helped them, honestly, but it definitely helped Harm's Way. It was definitely like, Europe's not scary, you know, in 2008 or I'm sorry, 2010 or whatever. It's like, Europe's not scary. Nachos has been there. Like, we can do it.
First Weekend Nachos show was in 2009. I had, well, funny story to back up. Weekend Nachos played 2 shows in Omaha instead of coming to Kansas City on the Punish and Destroy tour in 2008. And I always thought that was like the wackest shit.
I still have no regrets. Kansas City sucks. Why would we play there?
On the 2009 Unforgivable tour, I went ahead and, Sorry Excuse, a band that I played in, we played a show with them in Cedar Falls. And that was actually the first time I saw Weekend Nachos, which was incredible. The craziest thing I ever witnessed was when I booked them in Kansas City for like the first time, and they played in a barn, Deado's barn to be exact, and literally we tore the barn apart. I mean, sofas, trash cans, I mean, it was just insane, just pure mayhem. It was incredible.
We played at this kid Deado, who lives in Liberty, Missouri. We played at his barn, like literally a barn, and it was just mostly people just throwing trash cans and garbage all over the place, and like cushions and mattresses, and it was crazy. The place got torn apart. It was amazing.
Yeah, for Unforgivable, I remember thinking it was cool how much more developed the slow parts seemed. It wasn't just like, oh, we played fast for a little bit, so now we need to do a slow part. It was like, oh, okay, like there's actually like more songwriting going into this. And
also Andy joining the band again right before that album was recorded resulted in like the heavier guitar tone and like the better production, all that.
Yeah, no, it seemed like, at the time, it seemed like a pretty reasonable evolution for the band. I mean, like John's songwriting is very recognizable to me. So like, even when the riffs are a lot different than maybe what people would expect from us, it's still very much like, I can still hear like his ideas in there and his voice in the riffs. So
I just started writing heavier songs, heavier, sort of slower songs. Not really listening to as much spaz, but more listening to bands like Blood for Blood and Tragedy and Marauder and things like that. So like naturally the sound was just like much like heavier and more brutal and chunkier and just like louder. I think that when it comes to Weekend Nachos songs, I always think back to Shot in the Head, where we stop and Andy goes, "You live and you breathe just like everyone else, motherfucker." That was like the ultimate like way of just calling out anybody that thinks they're better than someone else, you know? And that was like a huge thing that we always had songs about, you know? It's just like, you know, you're no different or better than me, like, you know, quit having this ego, you know? So like sometimes I think that line was like so perfectly executed. The reason that Bleed happened, I can explain pretty simply. I was listening to two bands excessively at the time, Earth and Bulldoze. And what you have is basically a beat down sludge record. That's Bleed. That's where it comes from.
Relapse wanted to do a record for us. They wanted to do like some kind of like EP or single, and I don't know, I forget who had the idea, but John and I got really into the idea of just doing something like way different, you know, because that was actually it's the only exclusive Relapse thing I think that we ever did, apart from the compilation.
It was the Beat Kitchen in like 2009 or 10. Oh, it was with Harm's Way and I think The Killer. It was around Christmas time. And I remember walking in and John behind the merch table talking about how they Googled the artwork for Worthless.
I think Unforgivable had been out for a year and a half or 2 years or something in that neighborhood, and we had toured the States a few times, done a boatload of little weekends and stuff. We went to Europe for the first time with Wojciech. The RSR guys hooked us up together, and I think it was while we were on the like month-ish long European tour we kind of started. Alright, like we did all the stuff, like time to make another record.
Like when Worthless came out, that was the first time we ever did like a free download before it even came out. We just streaming and free download of the entire record, and honestly people just went apeshit over it. They were just, holy shit, Weekend Nachos is back, because a lot of people didn't like Unforgivable because it was like slower and like not as like spaz influenced as Punish and Destroy. And I guess Worthless kind of was like a mixture of the two styles again, according to a lot of people. I don't know.
But it all like really coalesced in a way that made more sense, I think, than it had before, and maybe even had after that. For whatever reason, the production choices, like I think that's probably our best sounding record too, and I don't really know why. Just kind of like a weird perfect storm. I think my best contribution to that record though was the concept of on the lyric insert with Brian and John doing the John Lennon Yoko Ono picture. I think that record was just like a perfect storm for everything that went into it. Actually, Drew wrote a significant amount of that record. I think this was during the time where he had his like insane back problems.
Unluckily for me, I blew up a disc in my back. I herniated it and it sort of burst. So I just ended up being completely
laid out. It put me in the definitely correct mindset of being bored and angry and all the other kind of things that fuel songwriting. And I had a burst of negative energy turn into creative juice. I came up with, I think, like 7 or 8 songs for Worthless. I think 6 or 7 of them ended up actually making it onto the record. And that was when John and I also did the Cyborg side project with my old roommate Tim. And I wrote a bunch of those songs at that point too. It was a very bad time, but I'm very proud of what came out of it. I think those are still some of my favorite songs that I wrote in my time with the band.
Jock Power Violence is a song about people basically not accepting us as a power violence band. Not that we ever really tried to be one in the first place, but Jock Power Violence is basically what a bunch of like PC punks called us, because we have like heavier influences. We play with hardcore bands and we play with bands that they would never go see. So it's like, oh, we're a bunch of jocks. We're Jock Power Violence. We're not really like Man is the Bastard or Crossed Out. We're like this like new kind of power violence that isn't really up to our standard. So they started calling us, and like Mind Eraser was another band that got kind of called Jock Power Violence on the internet and stuff. Sex Prisoner and other bands that got kind of chastised for having heavier influences. I mean, I don't get it. To me, it's all just fast music, but I wrote the song just as kind of like a fuck you to those people. The guy that was originally supposed to do the rap part in Jock Power Violence was Dre from Donnybrook, but he couldn't do it. Like, it was all set and everything, but he couldn't do it. He wasn't able to do it. So at the last minute, Drew was like, hey, let's have Patrick from Fall Out Boy do it. And we were all like, of course. That'd be great. It'd be the perfect thing to do, and he did it.
When they were recording still, we were standing there and Andy was doing some like ambient guitar part. I forgot what song that is. And John's like, he's like, oh, whoa, play that back. He's like, that sounds like I just died and I'm going to heaven and some angel dude is just blowing me.
I never fucking said that. I definitely said that, I'm sure. I can't remember that because that's probably one of like 200 things I said during that recording session that just didn't matter.
I thought it was like the stupidest thing ever, and they're recording it this really dark part.
We had a ton of our friends there doing backup vocals and guest spots and all that, and I lived with Kevin at the time, and it was really cool I love Kevin's voice. I think it's awesome, so having him do a part, recording is always fun, but that session was especially fun.
The thing that I remember about still was recording it, at least. We set up the drums and we started getting drum levels, and then like 4 preamps that I had the drums in like exploded, and I was really psyched on the drum sound, and then these preamps fucking went to hell. So I was like, okay, recording it, I don't know. I don't have any, other than that, I don't have any particular bad or good memories about recording it. Mixing it was definitely extremely stressful. John didn't have lyrics for like most of the songs when we recorded it, which was like a new thing. He always was like, I mean, he had in the past he'd like had an LP's worth of lyrics written before there were even songs written. I didn't mix the record because I was waiting to get the vocals done, and then all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, it's like, okay, like we got the vocals done. You need to mix this in like right now, or else it's not going to be out in time. So it went from being this like, I think it started kind of relaxed and fun, and then we were waiting on John to write lyrics and to record the vocals, and then all of a sudden at the 11th hour it turned into this fucking nightmare. I actually have like very terrible memories of mixing that record. And I think that record actually doesn't sound as good as a lot of our other releases because of it. Another one that I really like to play that we don't really didn't really play so much was You're Not Punk, which is one of the 2 or 3 songs I wrote for Still. And I was really proud of how that one came together, and I also like playing it because I like getting to scream "You're Not Punk" before the breakdown. So I don't know. That's the song that I'm just like proud of personally for writing, and I think objectively listening to it years later that it's still a pretty cool song. And I just like the lyrics that John wrote because I get to scream "You're Not Punk" at a bunch of people who probably aren't punks.
John, myself, Andy, and Brian, line up. I think it is our least favorite record collectively. I will say that the record release show for that record is memorably one of the absolute best Chicago shows we ever played.
The Still record release, the kids were just going nuts. The kid went through the wall, I remember that, and the drywall was ruined. A table broke. This was all during their 20-minute set. I found an open knife in the pit that I had to remove. The thrash scene out there in Pilsen, like those kids are crazy. A few years ago, I remember seeing them a lot at Albion House. A lot more house shows and basements with some of the first real hardcore punk bands I've ever seen.
We probably played Albion House like 8 or 9 times, I want to say. What's funny is the Torture EP record release show was at the Albion House. So even way back then we were playing there. But yeah, some of our most cherished shows were at the Albion House for sure.
Man, a lot. I mean, we played at Albion House when I was in like the very first version of the band. When I was like first in the band, that was one of my favorite places to play. I mean, it was like so small and it sucked like moving your equipment around, and like you might just get like fucking punched in the face like while you're trying to play. But man, those shows were great down there.
I don't think any band of mine will ever play there again, to be honest, but there was a time when that space was very important to Chicago and very inclusive, and pretty much any type of band could get a show there.
For a while, John was playing sets in like a North Face jacket because he was sick. So he was trying to sweat out his sickness on stage. So he looked like puffy and he was like sweating his ass off on stage. It's like 100 degrees.
It wasn't because I was always sick, because I only get sick like once or twice a year, honestly. But I always wore that puffy jacket during the winter because I had a strict policy of never taking off my coat at shows.
I think it was because it probably started because we played, it was winter, so he had his puffy winter jacket, and we played some show, and the show itself, it was fucking hot as hell inside, and super sweaty and humid, and John was behind the merch table, and he was like still wearing this jacket. Why are you still, it's like so fucking hot in here, that can't be comfortable. And then that turned into like a joke, like, dude, you should just keep wearing it when we play. People definitely noticed it when we would play, because people would literally be like shirtless and pouring sweat, and John's wearing his like fake Timbs and like puffy jacket, like jumping around on stage. Like, how are you not dead right now?
Yo, this whole song is about setting this whole place on fire and killing everybody in the building. Fuck every human being on this planet, including myself. Fuck all of you. You all suck.
fine. So, you know, I've gone on a few tours with him. We've done a lot of really cool stuff. Probably one of like the most special things was like after my grandfather died in 2011. It was like it dealt me like a huge blow personally, and so I had just called John up. I was like, man, I need to get out of town, and so he's like, come up to Chicago, like let's go with us to this weekend. We played like Milwaukee and Madison, and they're like, just come. And so I came up and I did that weekend with him, and it was like, honestly, it was like a breath of fresh air. Like I spent time with him, and it was like cool, and probably one of my probably my fondest memory for sure.
I remember they played Bleed, one of my favorite sets. They actually played the opening track from Bleed. I think it was at the Arlington Heights Knights of Columbus. They never did that, and John was like already pissed off about something. I don't know what he's pissed off about, and he was just in such a bad mood, and they went up and opened with Bleed, and I had never seen John that intense on stage, and I think he just bought a pair of fake Timberlands and was stomping around in them.
I still have those fake Timberlands. They're honestly the greatest shoes ever made. I've played probably 6,000 Weekend Nacho shows in these.
So Brian had this flashlight, but it was like fucking like 2.5 feet long. I mean, it was like this long of a flashlight and it probably weighed like 10 pounds, or like, it was huge. It was this huge fucking, like, why does anybody need a flashlight this large? And so, but it became this kind of joke, like, it was just funny to have like this weird object, and we jokingly dared Brian to mosh with it during Harm's Way. Then all of a sudden they were playing, I think they were playing Warriors Will Reign. I can tell you that Harm's Way played Warriors Will Reign, but I can't tell you that what song we played. But all of a sudden Brian runs into the pit holding this like 2 foot long like steel baton of a flashlight and starts like swinging it around, moshing with it. And I remember watching him just being like, he's going to actually fucking kill someone. That's like so beyond ignorant. Somehow though he did not hit anyone, and it was just really funny that he did it, so it all worked out fine.
I don't think I was really thinking of it much like, oh, we accomplished this, you know, this is such a big deal. But, you know, 10 years, we thought this is an excuse to do a 10-year show, and let's celebrate it. Let's get friends bands to come out, and let's make a good show out of this.
I mean, it's pretty weird to me, honestly, because I still feel like I'm 23, and, you know, and it's weird to think that, you know, Weekend Nachos and us have been able to like play at a pretty high level for a long time.
For me, it was always more like, it was always weird to just think about like how much had happened just in my life during that time. Like it was, I was like in school to like be an art teacher, and then at the end of it I had dropped out, I had done all these tours, I had formed other bands, and then suddenly I got back into recording, and now I was basically like almost a professional recording engineer, and I'd had all these relationships and like known these people, and like these people died, and like all this happened. It was just like life sort of milestones in relation to the band was always kind of the thing that had the most impact on me, I guess.
How it started as a joke, to play the House Cafe, and it wasn't supposed to be a serious thing, and to last 10 years successfully and still putting out some of their best material.
It's interesting to me to see them, to hit 10 years, it's just funny to think back on like how unstable the band was at one point, and could have potentially totally fallen apart, you know, and almost did.
Biggest challenge that we ever had as a band was probably keeping a steady lineup, because it was just a revolving cast of bass players and drummers for a while. And then eventually Aaron left, and it was literally just me. Eventually, when Unforgivable came out, we got a steady lineup.
And to go from there to being together for like 10 years after that, and doing everything that they'd done past Punish and Destroy.
And then that moment of like, holy shit, it's been 10 years since that happened.
incredible. I mean, you think about punk and hardcore. I mean, a lot of bands don't get past the demo stage, and this is a band that transcended from demo to your first few 7 inches to that first LP, you know, to Unforgivable. I mean, they just kind of just kept going, and this was a band that literally was like going against the grain. I mean, people hated Weekend Nachos when they started. They got no respect, you know, and so to see them get to a 10-year anniversary was huge.
There we go.
Seriously, thanks for coming. Our first show was in DeKalb 10 years ago, and there were 7 people there, and they absolutely despised us. I'm glad to know that there are 7 people here that like us today. There are people and bands from all over the country in this room right now. Honestly, I care more about punk and hardcore than I do this band, and I just want you to know that that's really what it is to me. It's a place where we come together and figure this shit out together. That's what hardcore is. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's the truth. We're lucky to have this. We're lucky to be in this room. Not everybody has that. So pat yourself on the back for being a part of something wonderful. Because that's all this is for me. This is an old song, followed by some more old songs. Goes out to Mitchell from Virginia and anyone else that traveled for this show.
It was more about like what my life had been doing during that time. You know, like the band itself, it all felt like a natural progression, you know, which is sounds weird and maybe like kind of privileged, where it's like oh yeah, I've been to Japan. Well, you know, we've been a band the song, so of course we're going to go to Japan, you know, whatever. But like a lot of people never get to do that, and I recognize that as a huge thing. But just being in it though, it just sort of felt like, oh yeah, we're going to do this next. Okay, cool.
Japan is unbelievable. It's like nothing else. Can't even describe it. Everybody that's been there and said, oh, you gotta go to Japan, I mean, it's true. I'm one of those people now. You gotta go to Japan. It's so fun.
Yeah, 2015, we did Japan and Australia. Australia, that was the only time we went. And Japan, it was the first of 2 trips, which is my favorite place that we've ever toured. They weren't necessarily like the biggest shows we've ever played, but they were really good shows and a really different, interesting culture. Like it's just cool to be there. Like it's a place I would like to visit every year.
The good kind of culture shock where it's like everything is like kind of familiar and they're like into Western stuff, but it's also like weird. I don't know, the people we met were amazing, like all the friends we made there, like every single one of them is like cool. Like there was never anybody who was like, oh, I really like him, he's kind of annoying, but they're fine. But you know, but everyone was cool. The food is amazing. The landscape is beautiful. Like we went to these like old monasteries and stuff, old temples.
The food is incredible. Everybody at the shows is super positive and nice and friendly and just wants to have a good time. The shows are set up really well. Everything's super organized. They've just got a great scene there.
I don't know. It's just great. People are super friendly there, and they fucking mosh really hard. Like you think like, you know, I think there's like the stereotype of like Japanese culture is like very like orderly and respectful and stuff. So I feel like going in, I didn't have like this image of like shows being like, you know, being rowdy but not like super violent. But it's just like, oh man, these people are like stage diving and like pitting really hard and like fucking rules. Like, yeah, dude, the bands we played with were awesome too. There's record stores everywhere that are great. Yeah, Japan is amazing. The thing that Japan has over everywhere else in the world that I've played is that you can play loud on stage and the sound person isn't a fucking dick about it.
We played with Full of Hell in some of their like really early days.
If I could summarize Weekend Nachos in one word, I would just say fun. First time I ever saw them was right before we went on a East Coast tour with them at the A389 Bash in 2012. But I just remember from that tour we played a show at Churchill's in Miami, and kids absolutely destroyed the venue when they played. We played on like an outside tent, and kids were just hanging from the ceiling and ended up like basically ripping down the awning that was like on the outside stage. It was like one of the coolest, craziest shows I had ever seen, and that show impacted me very much so because we looked so much up to Weekend Nachos. Like they were like one of our favorite bands, and we couldn't believe that we were actually able to tour with them at that point. Like we were a pretty new band at that point, and John made sure that we got paid the same exact amount of money as they did at that show. And like from coming from a standpoint of from a band that we looked so much up to, like treating us as equals, like that's one thing we took away from Weekend Nachos and John and that show altogether, is just, you know, treat every band and all of your peers like equally. Like don't put yourself on a pedestal.
I felt this pressure that if I quit, the band would break up, and I also didn't want to do that to my friends who seemed to be enjoying it a lot more. So even though I wasn't feeling like a lot of passion for it, sporadically I would. When we get down to writing, I would, but you know, a lot of the in-between times, and a lot of times on tour, I would just be like, I don't know, do I want to be sleeping in this like filthy fucking basement in who knows where? Like I could be at home, like working and whatever, you know. So there's a lot of like internal struggle for me in situations like that. And yeah, but at the same time, it was sort of just like, wow, this is kind of like what I do. But do I like it that much still? I mean, the band is pretty much, Weekend Nachos is pretty much like why I'm a recording engineer right now. Like, Weekend Nachos is the reason that I can have like just this job and just do this. Yeah, when I talk about like the band giving me more than I've given it, like this is definitely like the biggest thing.
We're not all getting the same thing out of this that we used to. People aren't liking to travel as much as we used to. I had a new job that I liked and didn't want to get fired from for touring all the time, and we were all post 30 maybe. Weekend Nachos is this thing, and everything that we're saying to each other right now sounds like we can't continue doing this in the way that it deserves to be done.
It doesn't make sense for us to play a lot of the Weekend Nachos songs anymore. On the other hand, though, like I still have a lot of that, you know, anger and hate inside me. I don't think it'll ever leave me, which is another reason why Ledge is happening now, because you know, Ledge is certainly not a positive band, you know. So a lot of those feelings are still getting channeled into like those lyrics and songs and riffs and all that. But there's a certain thing about Weekend Nachos that just I don't think any of us really feel inside us as much anymore.
Stupid name aside, it was a serious band. And if we weren't going to collectively be able to devote ourselves to it in the way that it deserved, we thought it would be better to sort of put it down and to become a band that plays like, we play this fest on the East Coast once a year, we play this fest on the West Coast once a year, we play this fest in Europe once a year, and we play 3 shows in Chicago or something. We just weren't interested in doing that.
When I heard Weekend Nachos was breaking up, I just thought, I was really surprised because they've been together for so long at this point. It seems like there's no reason for them to break up, but that there are definitely reasons to stay together.
He told me a few months before they announced it, and initially I was like, why? No, like, you said you were never gonna break up and this and that. And
another round of America, Japan, Europe, just kind of cover these places that we had gone and see all these people one more time with some new music in hand and say goodbye.
But when you're breaking up, you're putting like kind of a nail in the casket in this way that for them, because they don't hate each other that much, then why bother, you know?
Whoa, they're still a fucking band? And then I found out that they have 15 LPs.
I understand in like the lineage of the band why it might make sense. As long as you're a band that like if you have any fun doing it still, which clearly they do, why break up?
To be honest, we were just finished with it. There's not really any drama, nothing. We weren't sick of each other or anything. We were just done doing the band. Sometimes you just know. Sometimes you're just like, oh well, you know, it's not like for any bad or good reasons, you know. We don't want to do this anymore.
What the fuck? I mean, where did they go? Like fucking Japan? They're in like Iceland now or some shit? What the fuck else did they do?
Like, how did we get to Iceland, you know? It was just cool to be able to go to Iceland before we called it quits, you know?
Everybody for coming out tonight. We will never see you again. This is our last tour ever. Goodbye.
it went from a joke, which were still badass songs, I love those songs, to putting out like some of the darkest, heaviest material out is so impressive.
Dude, it's like when we like go back, like when I saw them before, like when they played like The Heist, there's probably like 250 people at the Heights, probably more. There's probably like a couple hundred, like 300-400 people there. And when they like would open up to like fucking 10 people, it'd be like me and the kids from Streamwood and stuff. And now there's like, I went to that show at fucking, it was like fucking sold out. So it's like insane to me that like a band that when you're fucking 17 years old, it's like you're this like guy that you met and there's like 10 people was like plays to like fucking hundreds of people in like a different part of the world, you know what I mean? And hear that they fucking sell out pretty good sized venues. All over fucking throwing snowballs and shit.
Thank you. All right. Yo, thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. This is the record release show for our latest and final album, Apology. Pick it up back there if you want. Otherwise, find and download, whatever. It doesn't matter anymore. So, but we all know it. You all know it? Now, how is everybody tonight? Yo, give it up to Leif for pretty much helping me book this whole thing. Get me a venue. Give it up to Township for putting this on. He's actually a Riot Fest sponsored event.
Cheers. That's good water.
It's good water. Thanks, Riot Fest. Let's do it.
Lots of water. Priorities. Especially with the benefit of hindsight, nothing is more incredible to me than the fact that I got to get sort of plugged into this global network of like-minded people literally all over the entire world and make lasting friendships with people that are in some places I literally never even heard of before.
I think that Weekend Nachos was kind of, for lack of a better term, sort of pushed out of the Chicago scene over time. Just because, you know, everything in hardcore and punk is so fickle and bound to change, you know. People outgrow things, and honestly, I think that the Chicago scene outgrew Weekend Nachos. I'm not complaining, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, I'm just saying it's life, you know.
I mean, it'd probably be a bunch of crybabies on the internet crying about, oh wait, that's what it is. I don't know, probably be a lot stupider.
There's all kinds of scenes in Chicago. They don't ever play together. You never see crossover shows really rarely anymore. And unless it's like a Weekend Nachos show. They're not too cool for anybody. They're so down to earth, all of them. And they do whatever the fuck they want, and they do it awesome. I feel like they cater to anyone. They're like the punk scene's punk, because they just do what they want and somehow manage to draw in everybody, do it well.
I wouldn't say the Chicago scene is any better or worse with us being gone, or much different. I think that the one thing that the Chicago scene may have lost by us leaving would be just shows where literally everybody is welcome, and you'll get 5 to 10 different crowds that never would have seen each other at another show. That's what Weekend Nachos did, is we brought people together and nobody even talked about it. It was just a given, And I am very confident and with no ego can say that that was one thing that we brought to the Chicago scene that I don't think any other band has.
Okay, so off the bat, Chicago is probably one of the most segregated scenes when it comes to extreme music and punk music, across the United States, right? So to think, and when I think about a Weekend Nachos show, going there's just so much diversity at the show. You'll see a kid in a Spaz shirt, a Crudo shirt, and Youth Today shirt, and then you'll see a kid in some beat down band shirt or whatever, So Weekend Nachos shows were very inclusive spaces in many ways.
Maybe we have had a broader influence on younger bands that I'm just not super aware of. I have heard people say that they really got into this kind of music because of us, so maybe there'll be other bands that play because of us, but with us not being there, I don't think that's going to have any... I can't imagine that having a really significant impact on what people do or don't do.
One thing that I hope carries through that I don't feel really does is that we were always sort of a fucking stupid band with a sense of humor. We did the band very seriously and it mattered a lot to us, but we also kept a sense of humor about everything. If there was a legacy, it would be to have fun.
I think, here's the thing, Weekend Nachos caught on really well with the punk scene, right? So with Nachos in town, when it came to a lot of the local DIY spots or DIY bands, whether it was Razor Fade or Boiling Over, they caught on really well. They had the respect of all the punk kids. And I think that comes from the fact that all these guys are punks to begin with, And I think with John kind of leading that whole way, I think that was very easy for them to transcend into kind of being appreciated from the metal crowd. And I think people understanding that they crossed a lot in that sense.
And Weekend Nachos is a band that's John's a dude that fucking loves hardcore, and and he knows that it's for idiots, and then you have a good time, and then you mosh and you dive off the stage.
Like a big dork, went up to John and was like, yo, I'm a big fan, whatever, I don't even want to know what I said, and he was so friendly, and he's so good at that, just being so friendly to probably the biggest spazzes ever.
John is a dick, and I'll fight him, and you put that on tape.
It's on tape.
It was a good outlet for me, and I'm sure it was a great outlet for them. And if they affected anybody else the way they affected me and influenced me, then people will have positive memories about them.
It's cool. I enjoyed my time in the band. I think that every era of the band, if it wasn't there, they wouldn't have gone on to be what they were. So even though when it started it was very, very different in terms of attitude and stuff, I think if that wasn't there, then it was growing.
I would say that Weekend Nachos just always kept adding more influences and just getting more brutal, heavier, faster, slower, more honest. And that's how you go from the demo to Apology. It's like a little kid to an adult, but they're the same person all throughout,
It all changed, but it was all you can listen to the last album and then listen to the demo or listen to the first EP, and it's very different, but you're that's definitely the same band. It's just got something about it. It's Weekend Nachos.
They're awesome. It's always, I guess, tickles me to see when I see Weekend Nacho shirts out in Chicago, or I saw them out in the world. It's hey, I know those guys.
I don't have anything important to say. Just thank you all for coming out tonight. I do want to say something. I'm trying to say it as non-angrily as possible. But you know what? I wrote a song and we just played it. It's called Judged. And you know what? I just think with the political climate right now, we ought to do a lot less accusing someone else of what they're doing and more standing up for each other. Because you know what? There's a fucking reason that no one gets their fucking ass kicked. No one feels small for their ethnicity or race or gender at a Weekend Nacho show. That's because I won't fucking tolerate it. And you know what? Someone out there may not be able to stand up for themselves. So instead of saying, hey you, white cis male, you're doing this. Hey you, you're doing this. Try fucking standing up for someone else and putting your money where your mouth is.
I'm not even a fan of Weekend Nachos. I don't know why you guys are. You know, like they're not real power violence to all the power violence fans, and they're not punk because they're tough guy music to the punks, and tough guy music it's too goofy because of their name and this and that, and they don't give a shit, and they're better than 100 of those other bands.
They just had like a pretty awesome following. Their whole pretty much after that first record came out, like since then. I feel like the following just never stopped. They like every show that I feel like that we've seen them at since then has been pretty well attended. Harm's Way sometimes doesn't draw that many people in Chicago, but Weekend Nachos seem to always like draw a lot of people. Every time we play out of town with them, even if it was for a few days, like they would always do it super well, and like that's hard to do as a band from Chicago. And I think that's what's most impressive to me is that. You know, a band from Chicago, like, never really had done what they did. And they kind of started, you know, being one of the first bands to be touring, going to Europe, you know, traveling abroad with their music and being super successful. And then on top of it, you know, being signed to a pretty big label, which is also very impressive, you know. So as a whole, I think, you know, I mean, I'm sure they'll tell you the same thing. I think their career as a band has been pretty awesome and will be remembered for a long time in Chicago hardcore.
everybody tonight? Who was here last night? This is it. Anyone that's here right now, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I'll always miss just hanging out with those guys, you know, like it was always just about us. We used to have pizza parties in hotels whenever we could afford it. We would just get like a bunch of Papa John's pizzas and just hang out at the hotel and eat that. That was fun. Recording is always going to be something that I look back fondly on. Andy recorded every single one of our albums in his studio, so, you know, it was a very intimate experience every time we recorded an album. And I don't think I'll ever experience that quite the same way ever again with another band or anything like that.
I think it's just really cool to see those guys be able to take it as far as they did and do it for as long as they did.
What's your favorite?
I like Worthless.
Worthless.
Yeah,
Worthless.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Me too. Me too.
Because if you told me 12, 13 years ago that the band that I was about to play the House Cafe in DeKalb with play our one fucked up show, you're gonna tell me that band would have gone to Europe 5 times and Japan twice and Australia and Iceland and all over the country. If you had told me that, I would have thought that was extremely unlikely.
Got to experience things that I know that I never would have experienced from doing, you know, anything else in life. I feel very lucky having been able to tour, release a bunch of albums, record in a studio. You know, there's just so many things that I've done and so many places I've seen that, you know, I feel like I could die tomorrow and I've done everything that I could have done with my life and more because of this band.
my like ashtray and drink, and I'll be like, ah. Okay. Boy, the good old days.
All the early lyrics, I think, are awesome. They remind me of like if you went through the diaries of the Columbine shooters.
Have you interviewed like an old person and made them listen to Weekend Nachos and seen what they thought?
No, we're not fucking BuzzFeed, Kyle.
Dude, do BuzzFeed. These 90s kids have never even heard Weekend Nachos.
And the only real joke that people make is just about our name. You know, oh, weekday tacos or Monday enchiladas. It's like, the thing to me is that I'm not pissed off that people do that. It just isn't funny. I like jokes. I like jokes that are funny. That's not funny. It just isn't funny.